Hello, I'm Mrs. Jansen. Let's draw a folk art country landscape together. Our artwork is influenced by folk artist Heather Galler from New York. Folk art is artwork that is created by the people or folks that live in a community. It often looks like the place they live. Folk artists add their imagination by adding simple shapes, colors, and lines to create patterns. Our next vocabulary word is landscape, a picture that shows a natural scene of land or the countryside. I think these two landscapes look a lot like the countryside where we live. Now let's learn about parts of the picture. If you're looking at a picture, you're the viewer. So the part of the picture that appears closest to the viewer, usually at the bottom of the picture, is called the foreground. And the part of the picture that appears farthest from the viewer, usually at the top, is called the background. The part of the picture between the foreground and the background is called the middle ground. Now it's time for us to create our own folk art country landscape. Please have your paper, pencil, and crayons ready. You'll see the screen change so that we can draw together. So please place your paper landscape style. That means our paper is going to be horizontal or across. And it gets its name from how we make art or what type of picture we're looking at. So when our paper is horizontal, it's called landscape style. We're going to start in the foreground at the bottom of the picture. Let's make a curved line that's more diagonal that goes up from the bottom toward the right and then curves around at the top. We're starting a road. And now, about 3 finger spaces away, add another curved line that's very similar to the first one you drew. But then when it comes to the curve at the top, the curved line meets the first one you drew. Now let's go to where they meet and add a diagonal line that goes up off to the right. And now we're going to add the hillside. Curve line, everyone's can be different. And now we've created the road, which started in the foreground, and then we see hills in the middle ground. I'm going to slide the paper down, and the first thing we're going to do is add folk art style houses or buildings. And everyone's can look different. And they do not need to look like houses look in real life. So remember, folk artists use simple shapes. And they don't even have to be straight lines. So I just drew the side of the house. And now I've drawn the front. I'm adding a horizontal line and another curved line for the roof. And I'm going to use different shapes for the windows. And as we draw today, you can use your own ideas. Yours doesn't have to look just like mine. We're all adding buildings. or houses. I'm going to start the second house. And you're going to notice that it's overlapped by the first house. So I only had to draw the part that I could see. And remember, folk art is a style. So it's not meant to look exactly like real life. We're using simple shapes. And now we've drawn a group of buildings or houses on that hill. And let's add your choice of houses or buildings on this one. And I wanted the buildings and the houses to look very different than they look in real life. So now that we've drawn those, I'd like to add a mountain behind these buildings. So I'm going to add in the background, I'm going to add a curved line. And now I'm going to add trees. And as you add trees, a lot of different trees, so you can decide what you'd like the tree to look like. So you can add the shape and then think about the texture. So I added what looked a lot like an upside down raindrop, kind of similar to the cypress trees that grow in our area. And then you can go back and add texture. And I'm going to add a shadow. Now, shadows don't look exactly like the object that casts the shadow. They're more distorted, or they're changed. This is the shadow from the second tree, and it's going to stop at the first tree. So we can draw trees in different ways. Remember, it's folk art, so they don't have to look exactly like they look in real life. That's never the goal. And first, just think of the shape that you'd like the leaves to be. So I used a lot of curved lines, and then you can go back in and add texture with a lot of different zigzag lines. And we'll use crayon to create more texture later. And I'm just going to add a small shadow for that tree. So you can decide where you'd like to add trees. It almost looks like a cloud shape. You might think of clouds when you add the tree. And notice how the trees are tilted or go in different directions. And that's what happens in folk art also. So they don't have to be completely straight. So now we've got a really good start to our landscape. And the first thing we're going to do is use black crayon. And we're going to start underneath that tree at that curve. And many times in landscapes, you see outlines of things. So we're going to trace around the things that we drew. So notice how I didn't trace the whole mountain because I know that that tree's in front. And I'm not going to trace this part of the hillside because the tree covers that. I'm just going to go back to the hillside. And now you're going to be adding colors of your choice as you color the buildings and the trees. You can decide what season it is. And you might want to consider outlining your buildings or houses with a dark color crayon. It does not have to be black. You can make the choice that you believe is best for your artwork. And I'm going to add the black crayon to the shadow. So now you can start coloring the trees. I'm going to start with the tree trunks first. And then when you add the trees, you do not have to just use one color green. Or it's folk art, you could use different colors. Maybe a blue, even a purple. So the work of art that we're creating today is influenced by Heather Galler, but it's also influenced by the work of art that we saw on the first slide we looked at. So remember, when you add one color on top of another in crayon, it's called blending. So I decided that I wanted to use the two different color greens and a blue. And after I color that main shape, I go on top and add small zigzags to add texture. So notice, to create texture, you can use different types of lines. They can be small squiggly lines or zigzag, sometimes even curved lines. And you can use different greens or more than one color on your tree. If you've decided that you'd like to show the season of fall or autumn, you might not be using green at all. You might be using some of the reds, the oranges, or the yellows. So we're all creating a folk art landscape together, but ours can look very different. So before we add the color to the buildings, I want to think about the land. And I know you looked at different landscapes. I'm thinking about the reds and the oranges that I saw in the first landscape we looked at. So I'm going to be doing more of a blending. So I think on the road, I'm going to start with brown first. And you get to decide what color you'd like your road to be. I'm going to be adding a darker orange on top of the brown, creating a blend to make a new color. I also might go back and add some red. I know you've got great ideas, so you get to decide what colors you'd like to use. And you can change the pressure as you use the crayon. I'm using a little heavier pressure out toward the edges of the road. And now I'm going to add a little bit of red on top. So that's really a blend of 3 different colors. And now I'm going to go to the hillside. And this is going to be a blend of colors also. We've got the black down for the shadows, so be really careful to keep your crayon out of the black so the black doesn't smear into your artwork. And I'm thinking of that first country landscape we looked at together. So the hills were more orange and red. But you might be thinking of the other landscapes that we looked at, or a landscape that you've seen in our community. So as we add color, we want to be thinking about texture. So it's okay if you see white specks, you just don't want to see large open areas of the white. And again, we're going to do a blending, so it's okay if you see small white open spaces. And blending is when we add one crayon over the top of another crayon. They blend or they mix to create a new color. So as you add that second color on top, make sure that you leave spaces in between as you're adding color so that the colors that you're blending are showing. So I want to make sure this area of the hill appears darker. So I'm going to go on top of this orange and add some red. And remember, I can add the color and leave spaces in between. And now I'm going to add some brown on top of that red. orange on top of the yellow and red. Art can have many layers. And notice the different colors that we're creating. And it's this lighter orange that I'm going to add on top of the yellow that we've left alone. And I'm going to bring some of the yellow over to the left of the hillside. All right, the mountain in the back is going to appear more red. So go ahead, you can add color, any color that you would like, to your mountain in the background. So don't forget the spaces in between the branches of the trees, if it's the mountain behind. And now it's time to add color to this hillside. So remember, the colors do not have to look like things look in real life. Remember, we can leave some spaces in between as we color, because we will be doing some blending. If you're not doing blending, it's okay if the spaces are small, but not large. I'm going to add a little bit of brown. Along the edge of the road on the hillside. And then I'm going to add the red on top of this dark orange. For blending. So very often when you blend, that second or third color fills in any of those white spaces that you've left. I'm adding orange on top. I hope you enjoy creating new colors as you're blending. So I think before I color the buildings and the houses, I'd like to add the sky. And we're going to do blending in the sky. The first thing we want to remember is that if we'd like to have clouds, they're moving and we don't actually draw the shape for the cloud with the point of the crayon. As we color the sky, we'll leave a shape open. So notice how we just created a shape just by coloring the sky. And that shape can be the cloud, and you can always go back and change it. Don't forget the sky meets the land. If you drew the space from the edge of the paper, similar to the way I drew it, the sky meets the hillside. And you do not have to add clouds. And again, you're adding your own ideas, so yours does not have to look exactly like mine does. So notice as we color, we use a lot of zigzag lines as we color around to create a shape for a cloud. So you're going to notice that right now the only white shape we have are the clouds and the buildings or houses. So now you can add color to the buildings and houses in any way you'd like, and they don't have to look like the colors you see in real life. using yellow around the black. Be very careful to keep your yellow crayon out of the black because it will really show if they blend together. So now I hope you've enjoyed creating your own country landscape. I hope you enjoyed learning about folk art. And I look forward to making art with you again soon.